So I want you to imagine sitting down at your kitchen table and pulling out this massive stainless steel mixing bowl.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, and you fill it to the absolute brim with raw spinach. And you sit there and you eat the entire thing.
Sounds pretty intense for a Tuesday morning.
Yeah, well, hold on, because now I want you to imagine doing that 74 more times.
Wait, what? 75 bowls?
75 massive bowls of spinach because, according to this 2015 agricultural study we're looking at today, that is exactly what you would have to consume today to get the same exact mineral content, specifically the iron that your grandparents got from eating just one single bowl back in 1948.
That is just, that's staggering.
It's completely wild, right? Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are basically taking a sledgehammer to, all the conventional wisdom out there surrounding gut health, acidity, and really the hidden root causes of chronic disease.
Yeah, we really are. And our source material today is an incredibly dense, revealing transcript from the Ultimate Human podcast with Brecka. He had this highly sought-after gut health and inflammation specialist on, Dr. Daryl Gioffre.
And I gotta say, if you've ever dealt with brain fog or, chronic fatigue or acid reflux, or even if you just want to understand why your super healthy modern diet feels like it's failing you, this deep dive is going to completely rewire how you think about your body's internal chemistry. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal text to unpack.
Yeah.
Because it directly challenges those foundational assumptions most of us we just accept about our internal chemistry.
Right.
Like if you look at the macro picture, modern medicine is essentially unassailable when it comes to acute trauma, right?
No, absolutely. Like if I get hit by a bus, take me to a modern hospital.
Exactly. The trauma surgeons, the emergency protocols. It is a true marvel of crisis care. But the text immediately highlights this staggering contradiction.
The spending versus outcomes thing.
Yeah. The United States accounts for roughly 5% of the global population, right? But we spend over 50% of the world medical capital.
50%. And where does that actually put us?
We sit at 72nd in global health outcomes.
Oh, wow. That's abysmal.
It is. We are funding a sick care system, not a healthcare system. And the core of this failure, according to the source, comes down to a complete misunderstanding of our biological environment.
Right, which brings us to this overarching thesis in the material. It says that the human body is alkaline by design, but acidic by function.
Right.
And I actually want to stop right there and just dig into that phrase for a second, because it sounds like a philosophical riddle.
Yeah, alkaline by design, acidic by function.
Yeah. If our design and our function are at odds with each other, it implies that the very act of just, being alive is somehow inherently damaging to us.
Well, in a purely metabolic sense, it actually is.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The body's optimal baseline, the design requires a slightly alkaline environment, particularly in the blood. However, the actual function of living creates this immense amount of acidic waste.
Okay, how so?
Well, every time your cells produce energy, they generate acidic byproducts.
Yeah.
Like cellular respiration produces carbon dioxide, right?
Right.
Which then forms carbonic acid in the blood. Muscle exertion produces lactic acid. Even digestion generates acidic waste.
So we're just constantly polluting ourselves just by existing.
Basically.
Yeah.
But historically, the human body managed this beautifully. We have this intricate internal buffering system designed to neutralize that daily acid load.
Okay, so what broke?
The problem is our modern environment. The soil, the food, the stress levels, it's all pushing that delicate buffering system way beyond its evolutionary capacity.
Which brings us right back to those 75 bowls of spinach, the great nutrient robbery. How did the soil get so compromised that our vegetables are, essentially just water and fiber mimicking the shape of actual food?
It's incredibly sad, honestly. It comes down to industrial farming practices.
Yeah.
Primarily monocropping and the heavy use of synthetic NPK fertilizers.
NPK, so that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, right?
Exactly. Those chemicals are great at stimulating rapid plant growth. They yield these massive, beautiful-looking crops, but they completely destroy the microscopic fungal networks in the soil.
Oh, I've heard of these, the mycorrhizal network.
Yeah. Those fungi act as this biological bridge between the rocks in the earth and the roots of the plant. They literally break down the hard trace minerals and feed them to the vegetable.
So if you nuke the soil microbiome with fertilizer,
then the plant looks identical on the outside, but it is entirely devoid of the trace minerals, the molybdenum, the manganese, boron, selenium, desperately. They act as the cellular spark plugs for our metabolism. So you end up with an entire population that is paradoxically overfed but profoundly malnourished.
Overfed and malnourished. That is such a stark way to put it. And, if we are starved of the minerals we need to neutralize the normal, everyday acid of living, what happens when we introduce a massive unnatural acid load into the system?
It's a disaster.
Because the source text really zeroes in on sugar here. And
Sure.
the statistics are just grim. The average American is processing roughly 130 pounds of sugar every single year.
Which is astronomical.
It breaks down to about 38 teaspoons of sugar a day.
Yeah, and to understand the real biological devastation of that number, we have to look at the liver's metabolic capacity.
Okay, let's look at it.
Because the liver is the primary organ responsible for processing fructose, right? But it has a hard physiological ceiling. The liver can only metabolize about 6 teaspoons of sugar at any given time before its enzymatic pathways are just completely saturated.
Wait. If the liver taps out at 6 teaspoons, but I'm, drinking a massive soda or eating a giant pastry that dumps 20 teaspoons into my system all at once, what happens to the overflow? I mean, the sugar doesn't just evaporate.
No, definitely not. The body goes into a literal metabolic panic. Once those hepatic pathways are saturated, the liver triggers a process called de novo lipogenesis.
De novo lipogenesis, making new fat.
Exactly. It forcefully converts that excess circulating sugar into fat. But here's the kicker. It isn't just benign, inert fat. It produces highly toxic, inflammatory byproducts.
Like what?
Like uric acid. So you get this massive circulating sludge of unmetabolized sugar and acidic waste, and that drives systemic whole-body inflammation.
Wow. And the specialist in our source, Dr. Gioffre, he actually refers to the standard American diet as the CRP diet, right?
Yes, completely refined and processed.
Completely refined and processed. Because it's essentially just a daily toxic acid dump into a system that's already starving for the minerals needed to clean it up.
That's exactly it. And what's really compelling is that Dr. Gioffre actually lived this. He wasn't just observing these metrics in a sterile lab.
Yeah, his origin story was incredibly raw. He shared that he was a chiropractor in his 20s, working in a clinic, but he was just a full-blown sugar addict.
Yeah, heavy addiction.
He was carrying 50 pounds of visceral fat. And he had this wake-up call that is honestly kind of hilarious, but also terrifying. He was leaning over a table to adjust a patient, and the physics of his clothing just gave out.
Yeah, his pants literally split wide open down the back.
I mean, could you imagine?
It's a jarring physical manifestation of a system that's just pushed beyond its structural limits. But what's vital to understand about his recovery is how he approached the biology of the addiction.
Because sugar is a real addiction.
Oh, chemically, yes. Sugar acts on the identical dopamine receptors in the brain as highly addictive narcotics.
Which is exactly why I struggle so much with the typical advice to just quit sugar.
Right.
Anyone who has tried a deprivation diet knows that cycle.
The white-knuckling.
Yeah. You white-knuckle it for like 4 days, your brain is screaming at you, the fatigue sets in, and then by Friday night, you are just sitting in the pantry eating a sleeve of cookies in the dark. It feels like a fundamental failure of willpower.
But the text makes it clear. It isn't a failure of willpower. It is a failure to understand cellular starvation.
Cellular starvation.
Yes. When you are mineral deficient, the body craves the fastest, most readily available source of energy it can find to just keep the lights on.
Which is sugar.
Exactly.
Right.
So the specialist didn't try to just cut the sugar out and leave this massive biological vacuum. Instead, he flooded the system with what it actually needed: deep cellular nourishment. He started by simply adding a concentrated green juice to his morning routine.
Though he admitted that first green juice tasted like absolute swamp water.
Yeah, he hated it. His palate completely rejected it.
Why is that?
Because his taste buds were hijacked. Chronic exposure to hyperpalatable, highly processed foods physically alters the density and the sensitivity of the taste receptors on your tongue.
Wow, so you literally can't taste real food properly.
Right. That's a biological loophole. The turnover rate for taste buds is roughly 21 days.
Ah, that magical 3-week window.
Precisely. If you can overwhelm the body with the high-quality raw materials it needs, like the alkaline minerals in those greens, for just 21 days, a shift occurs.
The cellular starvation ends.
Yes. The body stops screaming for the toxic, quick energy of sugar because the mineral reserves are finally being replenished. So the swamp water begins to actually taste vital and refreshing, and those intense, agonizing sugar cravings just evaporate.
That is so empowering. Okay, so let's track those alkaline minerals into the bloodstream because this leads us directly into one of the most pervasive and honestly most irritating health marketing scams of the last decade.
Let me guess, alkaline water.
Yes, alkaline water. I see these fancy bottles everywhere, promising that drinking water with a pH of 9 is going to alkalize your blood. The source text basically takes a sledgehammer to this idea.
Because the whole concept demonstrates a total ignorance of basic human physiology.
Tell me about it.
It is biologically impossible for a beverage to alter your systemic blood pH. The pH of human blood is governed by this rigorous, uncompromising chemical system called the bicarbonate buffer system.
Okay.
Blood pH must remain tightly regulated between 7.35 and 7.45. The ideal target is exactly 7.4.
And what happens if it shifts?
Well, if your blood pH were to drop by even 1 full point down to 6.4, you don't just experience fatigue or a headache. You go into a coma and you die.
Wow. It's the body's biological kill switch. It simply won't allow the blood to become acidic.
Exactly.
If I understand the text correctly, the body treats blood pH the same way it treats core body temperature, right? Like
Right.
if you walk out into a blizzard wearing shorts and a t-shirt, your body doesn't just let your organs freeze.
Right, it constricts the blood vessels.
Yeah, it constricts the blood vessels in your extremities. It will literally sacrifice your fingers and toes to frostbite just to keep your heart and lungs at 98.6 degrees.
That is the exact physiological mechanism at play here, just translated to chemistry. When you consume a highly acidic, processed diet, the blood threatens to shift toward acidity.
And the internal thermostat panics.
Yes. It must buffer that acid immediately to prevent death. And to do that, it needs highly alkaline minerals.
But if those minerals aren't present in your diet because, your spinach is depleted and you're living on processed food, where does the body look?
It looks internally.
Oh, wow.
It looks right at your structural reserves. It triggers specialized cells called osteoclasts to actively break down your skeletal system.
It dissolves your bones?
It literally leaches calcium from your bones. It strips magnesium from your muscle tissue. It pulls bicarbonate from your oral cavity. The innate intelligence of the human body is so intensely focused on immediate survival that it will gladly induce osteoporosis, joint degradation, and muscle wasting over a period of decades just to keep that blood pH locked at 7.4.
That is terrifying. So buying alkaline water is a complete waste of time because the second it hits the highly acidic environment of your stomach, it just gets instantly neutralized anyway.
Exactly.
So when we talk about an alkaline diet, it has absolutely nothing to do with changing the pH of your blood. It is simply about providing your body with an external supply of calcium, magnesium, and potassium so it doesn't have to cannibalize your own skeleton to survive.
That is the core truth right there.
Yeah.
You are taking the stress off the emergency buffering system. And when you fail to do this, the physical toll on the blood is actually visible under a microscope.
Really? Like you can see it?
Yes. The specialist uses dark field phase contrast microscopy to observe live blood cells in real time.
And what happens to the red blood cells when the body is overwhelmed by this acidic stress?
Well, healthy red blood cells should look like separate, perfectly round, floating spheres. They have this slight negative electrical charge on their surface known as the zeta potential.
Zeta potential.
Okay.
Right.
And that charge causes them to naturally repel each other, much like two magnets of the same polarity.
Right, they bounce off each other.
Exactly. But when the blood is flooded with acidic waste and sugar, that delicate electrical charge is neutralized. The red blood cells lose their ability to repel one another.
Oh, no.
So they collapse and they stick together in these massive, slow-moving chains. The technical term is rouleau formation, but the specialist refers to it simply as blood sludge.
Blood sludge, that sounds so visceral. If your red blood cells are sticking together like a roll of coins, how do they get through the microscopic capillaries to deliver oxygen?
They cannot. That is the crisis. Red blood cells are the biological delivery vehicles for oxygen. If they are clumped into a sludge, they cannot squeeze into the microvasculature of the brain, the muscles, or the organs.
Wow.
This is the physiological root of chronic brain fog. It is exactly why people can sleep for 10 hours and wake up feeling totally exhausted. Their tissues are experiencing systemic, low-grade suffocation.
That makes so much sense. But the biological fix for this, which is detailed in the text, is absolutely mind-blowing. It involves chlorophyll, right? The green pigment in plants.
Yes.
Why does drinking something like wheatgrass or concentrated green juice break apart this blood sludge so effectively?
It comes down to a breathtaking example of biological mimicry. If you examine the molecular structure of human hemoglobin, The oxygen-carrying protein inside those red blood cells, it's built around a specific chemical ring called a porphyrin ring.
Okay, a porphyrin ring.
Now, if you lay the molecular structure of plant chlorophyll right next to it, the architecture is virtually identical.
Wait, really? A plant molecule and a human blood molecule sharing the same blueprint.
Almost exactly, with
Yeah.
one singular vital difference. The center atom of human hemoglobin is iron. The center atom of chlorophyll is magnesium.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, when you consume a high-quality deep green juice, you are functionally giving your body a highly compatible, mineral-rich blood transfusion.
That is incredible.
The massive influx of magnesium immediately goes to work buffering the systemic acid. And as the acid is neutralized, that healthy negative electrical charge, the zeta potential, is fully restored to the red blood cells.
So they become magnets again.
Exactly. The cells physically push away from each other, the sludge dissolves, the cells separate, and oxygen instantly rushes back into the starting tissues.
That completely reframes why we need to eat greens. It's not just, fiber is good for you. It is a literal electrical reset for your red blood cells.
It's pure electrical chemistry.
Okay, so we've established how the body manages this massive acidic burden systemically. But we have to travel further down the digestive tract now because everything we just discussed gets violently flipped on its head when we reach the stomach.
Oh yes, GI North.
Yeah. If you were listening to this right now in traffic and you're maybe chewing on a chalky antacid because your morning coffee is burning your chest, you need to hear this next part. Because the source material drops a paradigm-shattering truth. Acid reflux is almost always caused by having too little stomach acid, not too much.
Yeah, it's a condition known as hypochlorhydria, or low stomach acid. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the most undiagnosed destructive root causes of cascading chronic disease in modern medicine.
I'm going to push back hard here because this sounds totally insane. If my esophagus is currently on fire from acid splashing up into it, how can the root cause possibly be a lack of acid? It defies basic logic.
I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive, but it only defies logic if you misunderstand the mechanical anatomy of the stomach.
Okay, explain the mechanics.
The stomach is not an open vat, right? It is a sealed chamber. At the very top, where the esophagus connects to the stomach, there's a specialized circular muscle called the lower esophageal sphincter, or the cardiac sphincter.
A cardiac sphincter.
Right, and its entire job is to act as a secure valve, trapping the highly corrosive stomach acid safely in the chamber.
So it's basically the lid on the blender.
Yes, but here is the crucial detail.
Yeah.
That muscle is not controlled by a physical switch. It is highly pH sensitive. It relies entirely on chemical signaling. The healthy, natural state of the stomach should be fiercely acidic. We're talking a pH around 1.5 to 3. When the stomach produces that massive volume of intense hydrochloric acid, the extreme acidity triggers a neurological feedback loop that forces the cardiac sphincter to clamp shut violently. It locks the door.
Okay, so high acid means a tightly sealed stomach.
Correct. But what happens when you consume the mineral-depleted, hyper-processed CRK diet we just discussed, plus chronic stress, and the natural 10% decline in stomach acid production we all experience every decade after age 20?
The environment changes.
Exactly. The stomach environment becomes too alkaline. The pH rises. The acid volume drops.
And because the environment isn't intensely acidic anymore, the sphincter doesn't get the signal to close.
That's the tragic flaw. The muscle relaxes. The lid comes off the blender.
Oh, wow.
Now, even though you have a pathetically low, inadequate volume of acid in your stomach, that small puddle of weak acid is free to slosh upward through the open valve and into the esophagus.
And the esophagus can't handle it.
No. The stomach has a thick mucosal lining designed to handle battery acid. The esophagus does not. So even a weak, pathetic acid will cause severe chemical burns to the esophageal tissue.
Like a bouncer at a nightclub?
Okay, I like this. Map it out.
Let's map it out. The stomach acid is the bouncer. If you have a massive, intimidating bouncer, high stomach acid, he controls the crowd, he locks the front door, and everything inside stays contained.
Right.
But if the bouncer is weak, tiny, and asleep on the job, low stomach acid, the front door just swings wide open. The chaos spills out of the club and into the street, which is your esophagus burning.
That analogy is highly accurate, but it also reveals the darker, secondary consequence of a weak bouncer. Because if the front door is wide open, it isn't just that things are spilling out. It means extremely dangerous elements are freely walking in.
What kind of elements?
Well, the stomach is evolutionarily designed to be a biological incinerator.
Right. Its job isn't just digestion. It's our primary immune defense against the outside world.
Yes. Every time we eat, drink, or even swallow saliva, we are ingesting hundreds of thousands of microscopic pathogens, bacteria, fungi, viruses, parasites.
Ugh, gross, but true.
A healthy, intensely acidic stomach acts as a firewall. It instantly burns those stealth pathogens alive before they can ever pass into the delicate ecosystem of the intestinal tract.
But when the bouncer is weak.
The firewall is down. Those pathogens get a VIP pass straight through the stomach. They colonize the small and large intestines, and that leads to severe dysbiosis, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO leaky gut, and massive systemic inflammation.
Man, and there's a third consequence to this low stomach acid that I found completely shocking in the text because it involves something millions of people are medicated for,
Yeah.
the thyroid.
Yes, the thyroid connection is huge.
The text explicitly connects low stomach acid to the epidemic of misdiagnosed thyroid conditions. How does that work?
The connection relies on understanding how the thyroid hormone actually becomes active in the body. So the thyroid gland primarily produces a hormone called T4, which is essentially inactive. To give you energy, clear your brain fog, and drive your metabolism, that T4 must be converted into the active form, T3.
And where does that happen?
Roughly 80% of that critical conversion happens outside the thyroid, primarily in the liver and the gut, using an enzyme called 5-dehydrogenase.
And what does that enzyme need to function?
It requires highly specific trace minerals, specifically selenium, iodine, zinc, and magnesium.
Which brings us right back to the bouncer. If your stomach acid is too low, you don't activate the digestive enzymes, like pepsinogen, required to break apart the proteins in your food.
Exactly.
So you could be eating wild-caught salmon and organic Brazil nuts, but without the acid, you can't extract the selenium and zinc from the food matrix.
Precisely. You are just passing expensive, completely undigested nutrition right through your gastrointestinal tract. You enter a state of severe cellular malnutrition. The liver and the gut are starved of the raw materials needed to convert T4 to T3.
And the conversion process halts. So a patient walks into the clinic feeling exhausted, gaining weight, hair falling out. The doctor runs a blood panel, sees low-active T3, and what do?
They diagnose hypothyroidism and prescribe a synthetic thyroid medication to artificially inflate the numbers.
Wow. They are medicating the thyroid gland for a failure that occurred in the stomach.
Yes. The thyroid was producing perfectly adequate amounts of T4. The actual mechanical breakdown was hypochlorhydria. If the physician had simply restored the stomach acid, the patient would have absorbed the selenium, the conversion enzyme would have turned back on, and the thyroid symptoms would have vanished organically.
That is just a terrifying cascade of misdirection. But, nothing exemplifies misdirection quite like how conventional medicine treats the acid reflux itself.
Oh, this is where it gets really dark.
Yeah. Because if the root cause of the burning esophagus is a weak bouncer and an open door, what exactly are we doing when we take an over-the-counter antacid, or worse, a prescription proton pump inhibitor like Nexium or Prilosec?
We are engaging in pharmacological self-destruction. Taking a PPI for acid reflux is the equivalent of noticing your car's engine is overheating. So you grab a hammer and smash the temperature gauge on the dashboard.
You silence the warning alarm.
But the engine is still actively melting down.
Let's break down the pharmacology of that, because millions of people take these drugs daily. What is a proton pump inhibitor actually doing to the stomach?
Okay, so the parietal cells in your stomach lining use an enzyme system called the hydrogen-potassium ATPase pump to secrete hydrochloric acid. A PPI drug is designed to completely block that enzyme system.
So it shuts down the pumps.
When you take these medications, you are artificially wiping out up to 95% of your stomach acid production. You are inducing a state of near-total aclohydria.
You are literally drugging the bouncer into a coma.
Yes. You are chemically guaranteeing that the cardiac sphincter will never receive the pH signal to close. You successfully neutralize the tiny amount of acid that was splashing up, which is why the burning sensation temporarily stops.
The dashboard gauge is broken.
But the valve is now permanently stuck open, your biological incinerator is completely offline, and stealth pathogens are flooding your intestines.
That is so counterproductive.
And what is most alarming is a recent study cited in the text showing that 54% of patients on long-term PPIs actually experience a paradoxical increase in their reflux symptoms over time.
Wait, their reflux gets worse on the medication.
Yes, because the underlying mechanical failure of the sphincter is compounding.
And the danger of keeping that valve open and ignoring the fire alarm isn't just discomfort, it becomes fatal. The most sobering moments in the source material come when both the host of that show, Gary Brecka, and his guest, Dr. Gioffre, reveal that their father suffered from esophageal cancer directly linked to long-term silent acid reflux.
Yeah, it forces a really hard pivot from theoretical biochemistry to the brutal reality of chronic tissue damage.
Dr. Gioffre's story about his father is just harrowing.
Sure.
He sets the scene. It was October 2014. He's in Central Park doing his final training run for the New York City Marathon. His parents are driving down Interstate 91 south from Vermont to watch him race.
And his dad was this tough, old-school Italian guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he had this persistent nagging cough for years that he just completely ignored.
And that chronic cough is a classic hallmark of silent reflux. It is the result of microscopic droplets of stomach acid continuously aspirating past the open sphincter and irritating the vocal cords and the lungs over decades.
So his parents are driving in the fast lane doing 70 miles an hour. Suddenly, with zero warning, his dad just blacks out at the wheel. The car starts drifting straight toward the concrete median.
Oh my God.
His mother, operating purely on adrenaline, has to physically lean over the center console, pry his rigid leg off the accelerator, grab the steering wheel, pull the keys out of the ignition, and somehow wrestle this deadweight vehicle safely to the shoulder without causing a massive pileup.
That is a phenomenal act of survival by his mother. But the diagnosis at the hospital is what permanently alters the specialist's career trajectory.
Right. He gets to the emergency room in Hartford, assuming it was a massive heart attack, but the doctor pulls him aside and says, "Your father didn't have a heart attack. He passed out because he was internally bleeding to death from esophageal cancer."
It's just devastating.
Yeah.
And if we look at the pathology of how a cough turns into cancer, it makes perfect sense. Acid, even highly diluted weak stomach acid, is an inherently caustic substance.
The text notes it is strong enough to degrade metal and dissolve bone.
Exactly. So when the cardiac sphincter is broken and that weak acid is allowed to continuously wash over the unprotected squamous epithelium of the esophagus day after day, year after year, it forces a cellular adaptation.
The cells have to change to survive.
They undergo dysplasia. They mutate into a completely different type of tissue columnar epithelium in an attempt to protect themselves from the chemical burn. This condition is called Barrett's esophagus. And if the acidic assault doesn't stop, those mutated cells eventually turn malignant.
His dad had to endure an 11-hour robotic surgery where they removed 2/3 of his esophagus, cut away half of his stomach, and then physically pulled the remaining stomach up into his chest cavity to reconnect the plumbing.
Just a brutal operation.
And despite surviving that, he succumbed to the complications a few years later. And the crazy thing is, the host's father had to go through the exact same gastroesophageal resection. It is an incredibly high price to pay for a broken bouncer.
Which is why the text shifts from diagnosis to an urgent clinical roadmap for reversing the damage. Because if a listener is currently taking a PPI and recognizing these symptoms, the most critical piece of medical advice the specialist offers is a strict warning.
What's the warning?
You must never quit a proton pump inhibitor cold turkey.
Which is everyone's first instinct. You hear this terror story, you run to your bathroom cabinet, and you want to throw the bottle in the trash. Why is stopping immediately so dangerous?
Because of a severe physiological backlash known as acid rebound, driven by hypergastronemia.
Acid rebound.
Yes. When you artificially suppress acid production for months or years, the body senses the alkaline environment and panics. It pumps out massive amounts of a hormone called gastrin, trying to whip the stomach into producing acid.
Okay, so it's trying to overcome the drug.
Right. The stomach responds by literally multiplying the number of acid-producing parietal cells. It builds a massive army of acid pumps that are all pharmacologically blocked by the drug.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If you suddenly remove the drug overnight, that massive, unnaturally large army of pumps all fire at once. You will experience a tsunami of hyperacidity that will cause agonizing pain, severely burn the already compromised tissue, and immediately terrify the patient right back onto the medication.
So the withdrawal has to be highly strategic.
Highly strategic.
Okay, so what is the first tactical step to waking up the bouncer safely without triggering the tsunami?
You begin with a gentle pre-meal biological hack. The specialist advises taking 1 tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar, diluting it in about 1/3 of a cup of warm water, and drinking it 20 to 30 minutes before your heaviest meal.
Wait, let's think about this. If I have an inflamed, burning esophagus, you want me to swallow a shot of straight acetic acid. How does that not cause an immediate blinding flare-up?
It is a valid concern, and the execution really matters. First, The warm water is essential because the thermal temperature acts as a gentle stimulant for the digestive tract, increasing blood flow.
Okay.
Second, you are not drinking enough acid to cause a burn. You are introducing just enough mild acetic acid to slightly drop the pH of the upper stomach.
And that's the signal.
That slight drop in pH is the precise chemical signal required to start waking up the cardiac sphincter. It sends a message saying, acid is arriving, prepare to close the valve.
Ah, okay. But the text does offer a caveat for people with severe active ulcers, right?
Yes. If the vinegar burns even slightly, you back off immediately. You start with just half a teaspoon. Or you swap the vinegar for fresh lemon or lime juice in the warm water.
Lemon juice. But isn't that acidic too?
Citrus contains citric acid, which provides the initial acidic trigger for the sphincter in the stomach, but it actually has an alkaline-forming effect once it is fully metabolized and absorbed into the bloodstream.
So the goal is gentle stimulation, not irritation.
Exactly.
But while the vinegar hack addresses the mechanical valve, you cannot heal the gut until you identify what is keeping the tissue inflamed in the first place.
Right, you have to find the trigger.
And the specialist operates on the principle of test, don't guess. He relies on two advanced diagnostic tools to map the terrain. The first is a highly specific food sensitivity test called the MRT, the mediator release test.
The MRT.
How does the MRT differ from the standard food allergy tests you get at a regular doctor's office, like the ALCAT test or an IgG panel?
Well, standard tests often just measure the presence of IgG antibodies, and that only tells you that your immune system has seen a food, not necessarily that it is actively fighting it. They are notorious for false positives.
Right, like you eat an avocado and it says you're allergic to avocado just because it's in your system.
Exactly. The MRT is infinitely more sophisticated. It measures the actual volumetric changes in your white blood cells and the specific release of chemical mediators like histamine and inflammatory cytokines when your blood is exposed to specific foods.
So it tracks the exact degree of biological warfare happening in your unique system.
Yes, which is critical because the healthy foods you are eating to heal might be the very things tearing your gut apart.
That's what happened to Dr. Gioffre. His entire cultural background revolves around Italian food, but he took the MRT test and discovered his body was mounting a massive inflammatory response to garlic. Yeah, not because garlic is inherently bad, but because his gut mucosal lining was so compromised that the active compounds in garlic were acting like biological shrapnel. He had to completely eliminate it for 3 months to allow the wounds to close.
Yeah, you have to stop scratching the wound before it can scab over. And that's where the second diagnostic tool comes in, the GI-MAP stool test.
To GI-MAP.
This utilizes DNA PCR technology to provide a microscopic inventory of your entire digestive tract. It isn't just looking for parasites. It is evaluating the functional capacity of your organs.
What are the specific red flags the specialist looks for on a GI-MAP?
3 primary markers stand out. First, elastase 1.
Elastase 1.
This is an enzyme produced by the pancreas. If this number is low, it means your pancreas is failing to produce the enzymes needed to break down proteins, which just confirms the downstream effects of low stomach acid.
Okay, what's the second one?
Second is zonulin. This is a protein that modulates the permeability of the tight junctions in your intestinal wall. High zonulin is the definitive chemical signature of leaky gut.
Leaky gut, right.
But the most critical marker is calprotectin.
Calprotectin, what exactly is that?
It is a protein released by neutrophils, a type of white blood cell, when they are actively fighting severe inflammation in the mucosal lining of the intestines. An ideal calprotectin score should be essentially 0, or safely under 50.
Under 50.
The specialist recounted a clinical case of a woman who came to him on 80 milligrams of a potent PPI, suffering from severe esophageal and oral ulcers. She had spent over $100,000 searching for answers. Her calprotectin score was 698.
698. Her gastrointestinal tract wasn't just irritated, it was an active biological war zone.
Precisely. And once you have this data, once you know your immune triggers and your inflammation levels, you must physically soothe the burned tissue before you can ever attempt to lower the PTI dosage.
Which brings us to the tea. The specialist uses a surprisingly elegant traditional botanical remedy for this, marshmallow root tea.
Yeah, the recipe he provided for this is fascinating.
It really is. You mix dry herbs in a glass jar, 3 parts marshmallow root to 1 part cinnamon bark. You take 1 tablespoon of that dry blend, put it in 8 ounces of water, seal it airtight, and let it steep at room temperature for 4 full hours.
Cold steep. Right.
What is happening during those 4 hours of steeping?
The cold water extraction is pulling a highly viscous gelatinous substance called mucilage out of the marshmallow root.
Mucilage.
Yeah, mucilage is a complex polysaccharide. When you strain the liquid and drink it, that mucilage physically coats the entire upper digestive tract. It binds to the mucin receptors on the irritated tissues of the esophagus and stomach.
Acting like a barrier.
Exactly. It acts as a profound anti-inflammatory and antihistamine barrier. It is essentially a biological liquid bandage that shields the raw tissue from acid while it repairs itself.
And it is only after you have established this foundation, you've removed the garlic or whatever your trigger is, you've coated the tissue with the mucilage tea, and you've added cellular building blocks like L-glutamine to help stitch the tight junctions back together. Only then do you go back to your doctor and begin the slow, agonizingly careful process of tapering off the PPI.
It's a very delicate step-down process.
You might step down to a milder H2 blocker like Pepcid, slowly lower the dosage over months, and finally, as the tissue heals, you introduce supplemental betaine hydrochloric acid to fully restart the biological incinerator.
It is the complete reversal of the conventional paradigm. We currently give osteoporosis patients calcium rocks to chew on, completely ignoring that the PPI they were taking has eradicated the acid required to dissolve the calcium in the first place.
It's madness. We treat the symptom while actively destroying the systemic mechanics.
Right.
Okay, so we've run the protocol. The bouncer is back at the door, the cardiac sphincter is locked tight, and the stomach acid is fully restored. But what about the rioters that already sneaked into the club?
Ah, the stealth pathogens.
Yeah, what about the pathogens that bypass the weak bouncer for years and colonize the intestines? We have to clean up the dance floor. How do we terraform a decimated microbiome?
Well, this requires moving beyond standard dietary advice and utilizing highly advanced biological tools. Let's start with probiotics, which is an area just rife with marketing misinformation.
Totally.
The specialists insist that standard refrigerator-aisle probiotics, like most lactobacillus strains, are functionally useless in a damaged gut.
Really? All the yogurt and the cold pills.
Basically useless.
Yeah.
You must begin with spore-based probiotics, specifically strains like Bacillus subtilis found in products like Megaspore Biotic.
Why are spores the key? What makes them different from the yogurt probiotics?
It comes down to survivability. A standard probiotic is incredibly fragile. It is like a microscopic water balloon. The moment you swallow it and it hits the harsh hydrochloric acid of the stomach, the vast majority of the bacteria are instantly incinerated.
It's just burned up. Exactly. A spore-based probiotic, however, has formed a highly resilient biological shield called an endospore.
Ah, it's an armored personnel carrier.
That is exactly what it is. The endospore allows the bacteria to remain completely dormant and impervious as it travels through the lethal acid bath of the stomach and the caustic bile salts of the upper intestine.
Oh, wow.
It only deploys its cargo once it reaches the specific, hospitable pH of the large intestine. And here is where their function becomes extraordinary. They use a mechanism called quorum sensing to read the environment.
Oh, quorum sensing.
Yeah, they don't just passively hang out. They actively identify and selectively attack pathogenic bacteria while simultaneously producing compounds that feed your native beneficial flora.
They are essentially microscopic bounty hunters.
Bounty hunters is a great way to put it.
The text actually cited a clinical trial involving 20-year-olds taking spore probiotics alongside their largest meal. Within 30 days, their markers for leaky gut were reduced by 44%.
Nearly half the damage repaired in 1 month.
Just by deploying the right biological armor. And that targeted defense is crucial, especially if the gut has recently suffered the ultimate chemical assault, a course of antibiotics.
Oh man, the antibiotic discussion in the text is grim.
It's terrifying.
The specialist equates a single course of broad-spectrum antibiotics to dropping a napalm bomb on your internal ecosystem.
Because it is indiscriminate destruction. The antibiotic successfully kills the pathogen causing your sinus infection, right? But it also massacres the trillions of symbiotic bacteria that regulate your immune system, synthesize your neurotransmitters, and maintain the integrity of your gut wall.
And the ecological devastation from one round of pills can last for up to 2 full years.
2 years of compromised immunity from a simple 5-day Z-Pack.
It's crazy. But the specialist provides a hyper-specific biohack to accelerate recovery. He calls it the post-antibiotic protocol using silver and aloe. How does this work?
So the protocol requires taking 1 tablespoon of pure liquid aloe vera combined with 1 tablespoon of bioactive silver hydrosol 3 times a day on an empty stomach for a period of 2 weeks.
Wait, swallowing silver? I understand using silver topically for burns, but what is a heavy metal doing inside my digestive tract?
Bioactive silver hydrosol consists of positively charged silver ions and nanoclusters. It acts as a potent, broad-spectrum immunomodulator.
Okay.
When the gut is napalmed by antibiotics, opportunistic pathogens, particularly yeast, candida, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria, they rush in to conquer the empty territory. The silver nanoparticles selectively disrupt the cellular membranes and the respiratory enzymes of those pathogens.
Neutralizing them.
Yes, neutralizing them without harming human tissue.
But if I just swallow liquid silver, wouldn't it get neutralized by stomach acid or absorbed way too early?
That is the genius of pairing it with the aloe vera. The aloe contains a complex polysaccharide called ace-mannan. It acts as a protective, viscous biological carrier.
So it shields the silver.
Exactly. The aloe envelops the silver, shielding it through the stomach, and transports it deep into the intestinal tract. Once there, the aloe powerfully soothes and repairs the mucosal lining, while the silver deploys to eradicate the opportunistic yeast and fungi.
It's a perfectly engineered delivery system. Protect the payload, heal the tissue, execute the pathogens.
Yes.
Now, there's another molecule the text focuses heavily on, and it feels like the bleeding edge of recovery science. Molecular hydrogen.
Oh, molecular hydrogen, or H2 gas. It is a foundational element of human biology that we have just completely compromised.
How so?
In a healthy, robust microbiome, the bacteria in your gut naturally ferment dietary fibers and produce massive amounts of hydrogen gas, roughly 10 liters every single day.
10 liters of gas sounds terrifying. It sounds like constant, painful bloating.
But it isn't. It is entirely odorless and rapidly absorbed. It does not cause distension. That internal hydrogen serves as a vital signaling molecule and a master antioxidant.
But we aren't producing it anymore.
Right, because our native flora has been eradicated by the CRIP diet, glyphosate in the soil, antibiotics. The vast majority of the population has completely lost their internal hydrogen production factories. This is why the protocol utilizes hydrogen-infused drinking water to manually replace it.
Let's explain the chemistry of why drinking hydrogen water is so profoundly healing, because the mechanism is stunning. It is described in the text as a selective antioxidant.
Yes. Most conventional antioxidants like high-dose vitamin C or vitamin E act somewhat indiscriminately. They can sometimes neutralize beneficial oxidative processes that the body actually needs for cellular signaling.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But molecular hydrogen is different. It is the smallest molecule in the universe, allowing it to rapidly diffuse through cellular membranes and cross the blood-brain barrier. And it specifically targets only the most destructive, toxic free radicals in the body, primarily the hydroxyl radical.
The hydroxyl radical, the chemical signature of aging and inflammation.
Yes, chemically represented as OH-, it damages DNA, proteins, and lipids.
Okay, so what happens when hydrogen meets it?
When you ingest molecular hydrogen, the H2 molecule hunts down the hydroxyl radicals. One molecule of H2 will bind to 2 molecules of OH-. If you calculate the chemistry, H2 plus 2 OH-.
You said H2O, you get water.
Exactly. It takes the most highly toxic, inflammatory molecule ravaging your cells and instantly converts it into pure, harmless, hydrating water.
That is basically magic.
It's chemistry. Studies cited in the text demonstrate that drinking hydrogen water can significantly lower brain inflammation within 30 minutes and has even been shown to halt tremors in Parkinson's patients. But crucially for our topic, it's the only known therapeutic agent capable of repopulating the beneficial anaerobic flora in the gut faster than an antibiotic can wipe them out.
So it acts as the ultimate biological antidote to the napalm bomb.
Precisely.
Now, alongside the hydrogen, the specialist utilizes one more advanced tool to stitch the gut back together: peptides. Specifically, a synthetic peptide known as BPC-157.
BPC stands for Body Protection Compound.
Right.
It is a 15 amino acid sequence that is natively discovered in human gastric juice. Its primary biological function is to rapidly accelerate the healing of connective tissue, mucous membranes, and the endothelial lining of blood vessels by upregulating a process called angiogenesis.
The creation of new blood vessels.
Exactly.
The host of the podcast mentioned injecting BPC-157 to heal microtears in his rotator cuff. But Dr. Gioffre uses it orally to heal the gut, and his method of taking it is highly specific. He doesn't just swallow the pill.
No, because if you swallow the capsule, it won't open until it reaches the lower stomach or intestines. He wants the healing to begin immediately.
So what does he do?
He pulls the BPC-157 capsule apart, empties the raw peptide powder into a tiny spoonful of yogurt or just a sip of water, swirls it around his mouth, and then swallows.
The logic there is flawless. The raw peptide creates the inflamed esophagus, bathes the compromised cardiac sphincter, soothes the stomach lining, and travels down the entire GI tract, physically stimulating the repair of the ulcerations and the tight junctions that were destroyed by the years of silent reflux.
It's incredibly targeted therapy.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of clinical terrain here. We've reignited the biological incinerator, deployed the armored spore probiotics, utilized silver and aloe to clear the pathogens, and stitched the barrier back together with peptides and hydrogen.
Really have.
But, healing in a clinical vacuum is easy. We have to live in reality. How do we defend this newly rebuilt ecosystem while still existing in the modern world?
This brings us to the concept of lifestyle defense. Biological sovereignty isn't about moving to a mountaintop and living on pure spring water, right? It is about building enough systemic resilience to handle the toxins of modern life without collapsing. Let's examine the ultimate modern crutch: coffee.
Coffee is non-negotiable for most people. It has incredible benefits like polyphenols and cognitive stimulation, but it is fundamentally acidic, containing over 35 different acids, which is a nightmare for an inflamed gut.
The specialist addressed this exact dilemma. Back in 2014, he was working with the television host Kelly Ripa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she was thriving on his protocols, but point blank refused to give up her morning coffee. So he applied biochemical engineering to the problem. He spent 5 years formulating an acid-kicking mineral powder.
Because you can't just throw baking soda into a dark roast. It would taste like seawater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had to isolate specific alkaline minerals, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium bicarbonate, that would selectively bind to and neutralize the inflammatory acids in the coffee, like caffeic acid, while preserving the beneficial antioxidants, like chlorogenic acid.
That's brilliant.
The result is that one scoop of this powder can completely neutralize the acid profile of a massive 20-ounce coffee, while adding MCT oils to provide clean brain energy and suppress the fasting insulin spike.
And he applied that exact same chemical logic to alcohol, because alcohol is essentially a massive acid bomb to the liver.
It creates a severe enzymatic burden. But by adding a few drops of a highly concentrated ionic mineral blend directly into a glass of wine or tequila, you can artificially raise the pH of that beverage to 8.4.
Which perfectly matches the optimal pH of a healthy intestinal environment.
Right, you are pre-buffering the acid. When you drink that pH-adjusted alcohol, your liver doesn't have to scramble to find minerals to process the toxins. It doesn't trigger the systemic inflammation, the gut lining isn't stripped, and the severity of the hangover, which is largely an acute inflammatory and dehydration response, is drastically reduced.
It's biological harm reduction.
Exactly.
Because the environmental assaults don't stop at our diet. Dr. Gioffre actually revealed that a massive part of his own health collapse wasn't just the sugar, it was invisible environmental toxins. He suffered from severe mold toxicity.
CIRS, right?
Yeah.
Chronic inflammatory response syndrome.
Yeah, and mold toxicity is a hidden epidemic. The text points out a terrifying genetic statistic. Roughly 25% of the global population possesses an HLA-DR genetic mutation that makes them highly susceptible to biotoxins.
The proverbial canaries in the coal mine.
Exactly. When they are exposed to mycotoxins from water-damaged buildings, their immune systems lack the antibodies to tag and clear the toxins. The mold spores continuously circulate enterohepatically from the gut to the liver and back again, driving massive neuroinflammation, crushing fatigue, and severe intestinal permeability.
And healing from that requires intense binders and all the peptides we discussed. But this leads to the most profound revelation in the entire source material.
What's that?
Because even with the perfect mineral powders, the spore probiotics, and the molecular hydrogen, you can still fail to heal.
Wait, really? Why?
Because chemistry cannot override psychology.
Oh.
The specialist recounted the absolute nadir of his battle with mold toxicity. He was physically bedridden. His neurological inflammation was so severe he was lying in a dark room staring at the ceiling, legitimately terrified that he would not survive to watch his young children grow up.
That is just heartbreaking.
He had access to every biohack on the planet, and his body was still dying.
That is the definition of the abyss. What finally pulled him out of it?
He stated unequivocally that his turning point wasn't a new supplement. It was finding his why. His wife took him to a church, and he surrendered his terror. He leaned into his faith and his community. And from a strictly biological perspective, this makes perfect sense.
Yes, because of the autonomic nervous system.
Exactly. When you are isolated, terrified, and convinced you are dying, Your nervous system is permanently locked into the sympathetic state, fight or flight. Your adrenal glands are pumping cortisol and adrenaline.
And in that state, the brain literally shunts blood flow away from the digestive tract and organs, sending it to the extremities to run from a perceived predator.
Right. Your body physically cannot secrete stomach acid, absorb nutrients, or heal tissue while it thinks it's running from a tiger.
You have to force the nervous system to shift gears into the parasympathetic state, rest, digest, and heal. Which is why the foundational pillars of the ultimate human protocol discussed in the text are completely free.
They are the biological prerequisites for healing.
Like deep, intentional diaphragmatic breathing to stimulate the vagus nerve and manually lower cortisol.
Hydrating the tissue immediately upon waking.
Moving the body daily, achieving those 10,000 steps, because physical motion acts as the pump for the lymphatic system, clearing out the cellular debris.
You must anchor the mind and master the free basics before the advanced molecular tools can even begin to work.
It is a stunningly comprehensive look at human biology. So let's pull all the threads together to see the whole tapestry we've woven today. We started by confronting the reality of our depleted Earth. The 75 bowls of spinach required to match the mineral density of the 1940s.
We mapped out how 130 pounds of annual sugar consumption overwhelms the liver, creating a toxic, acidic state that forces the body to cannibalize its own skeleton to maintain blood pH.
We visualized the oxygen-starved blood sludge and how the brilliant biological mimicry of chlorophyll in green juice can restore the electrical charge and break that sludge apart.
We fundamentally deconstructed the paradox of acid reflux, revealing that the burning in the esophagus is not caused by an overproduction of acid, but by a weak, alkaline stomach failing to trigger the cardiac sphincter.
The bouncer asleep at the door. We saw the tragic consequences of drugging that bouncer with proton pump inhibitors, the resulting malnutrition, the misdiagnosed thyroid failures, the invasion of stealth pathogens, and the devastating cellular mutations that lead to esophageal cancer.
But we also illuminated the pathway back, utilizing warm water and apple cider vinegar to mechanically stimulate the valve.
Deploying the MRT and GI map tests to accurately chart the inflammation. Soothing the burned tissue with mucilaginous marshmallow root tea, allowing the body to safely taper off the suppressive medications.
And finally, we explored the futuristic arsenal needed to reclaim the microbiome, the armored survival of spore-based probiotics, the precise cellular execution of silver and aloe,
The miraculous free radical neutralizing power of molecular hydrogen, and the targeted tissue repair of BPC 157 peptides.
It is a complete masterclass in reclaiming biological sovereignty from a broken medical paradigm.
If you are sitting in traffic right now absorbing all of this, you do not need to rush out and buy a chemistry lab's worth of supplements tomorrow. The true value of this deep dive is that you are now equipped to ask the right questions.
Exactly.
The next time you experience that heavy brain fog, or you feel that familiar burn in your chest after a heavy meal, you won't just blindly reach for a chalky antacid to smash the dashboard gauge. You will visualize the bouncer at the club. You will understand how your internal thermostat is frantically pulling calcium from your bones to keep you alive. You finally understand the underlying mechanisms governing your health.
And as we conclude, I want to pose one final, slightly chilling extrapolation based on the trajectory of this science.
Let's hear it.
The specialist made it clear that a single round of antibiotics acts as a napalm bomb on the microbiome, with the devastation lasting for years. Historically, humans would naturally reinoculate their gut bacteria by consuming unwashed, deeply mineralized root vegetables pulled from vibrant living soil.
But today, as we established, that microbial bridge in the soil is dead.
The environment can no longer passively heal us.
The safety net is gone.
It is entirely gone, which leads to a profound question. Are we rapidly approaching an evolutionary bottleneck?
What do you mean?
Are we entering a biological era where maintaining a functional, healthy human microbiome will no longer be a passive natural inheritance, but will require aggressive, daily, highly technological intervention like bioengineered spore encapsulation and molecular hydrogen generation merely to survive the toxicity of the modern world?
Wow.
It is a stark paradigm shift in the human experience. It is certainly something to chew on, preferably with an abundance of stomach acid.
That is a brilliant, heavy place to leave it. The diagnostic landscape might be murky, but we finally have the blueprints to navigate it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious.